I'd like to welcome each one of you to our devotional study today. I invite you to take your Bible, come with me if you would, to Exodus chapter 21, and we're going to begin looking at verse 12 today as we come into the remainder of this chapter, Exodus 21, 12 through 36. We see that Jesus is continuing to deal with civil law here, and he deals with capital punishment and offenses and damages as we move through the rest of this chapter. So let's just read Exodus chapter 21, and we'll start in verse 12 and read down through to verse 17. It says, "He that smiteth a man so that he die shall be surely put to death. And if a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint thee a place whither he shall flee. But if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, thou shalt take him from mine altar that he may die. He that smiteth his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. And he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. And he that curseth his father or his mother shall surely be put to death." So as we look into these things, we see here that God is giving us his mind regarding certain criminal offenses. And some of these we may look at and think, man, these things are pretty harsh. But yet, as we look at it, we understand that it helps mankind view the seriousness with which God views sin. I don't think anybody would argue with the fact that as we have moved away from the commands of God and from the directives that God is giving in his word, that our nations have continually gone into more and more wickedness. So as we come into these things, we just want to see what it is that God has to say about some of these things. We see, first of all, that he mentions the simple truth that the death penalty is for homicide. Here, as we look at verses 12 through 14 of Exodus chapter 21, we see that it clearly teaches the death penalty for murder. And this is not the first time that this is mentioned. We actually notice it right after the flood, as Noah and his family come out of the ark. God says this in Genesis chapter 9, verses 5 and 6. He says, "And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man." And then he goes on to say this in Genesis 9, 6. "Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man." So there we see very clearly that not only in Exodus 21, verses 12 through 14, but also we see that in Genesis chapter 9, verses 5 and 6, that the death penalty is taught for those who commit murder. You say, well, that's the Old Testament scriptures. Well, let's come to the New Testament scriptures. Go to Luke chapter 23. Luke chapter 23 and verse 39. It says, speaking of the people that died on the cross with him, it says, "And one of the malefactors which hanged railed on him, saying, If thou be the Christ, save thyself and us. But the other, answering, rebuked him, saying, Dost thou not fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly," notice this, "for we receive the due reward of our deeds, but this man hath done nothing amiss." So here's one of the thieves on the cross lecturing the other thief on the cross, when he comes to himself. And he says, "Don't you understand who this is that's between us?" He said, "We deserve to die for the crimes that we have done, but this man has done nothing amiss. He has not done nothing wrong. There's not a reason in the world why he should be receiving this death penalty like we are." Notice also in Romans chapter 13, what Paul instructed the church of Rome in Romans chapter 13, verses 3 and 4. It says, "For rulers are not a terror of good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is a minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil." So there we see that Paul's reminding the church of Rome here that the government, God has given the government the authority that when certain laws of the land are broken, like murder, for example, that it is punishable by death. He says, he beareth not the sword in vain. And then in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 8 and 9, it says this. It says, but we know that the law is good if a man use it lawfully, knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly and for sinners, for unholy and profane, for murderers of fathers and murderers of mothers, for manslayers, for whoremongers, for them that defile themselves, for mankind, for men stealers, for liars, for perjured persons, and if there be any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine. So in other words, Paul reminds them of the simple truth here. Hey, listen, if you've never broke the law, you've got nothing to worry about. For those who are law-abiding citizens, it should matter not what the consequences are for disobedience to the law, because they're not disobeying the law. But yet at the same time, he's reminding them that these things are in place for the protection of society. You see, in the very previous chapter, Jesus told them in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 13, we find that command, thou shalt not kill. So he tells them very clearly that it is contrary to the law of God. It is against God's law for an individual to kill somebody else. And then one chapter later, in Exodus 21 and in verse 12, he tells us what to do to those who disobey the command, thou shalt not kill. And this is what he says in Exodus 21:12. He that smiteth a man so that he die shall be surely put to death. She said, listen, anybody that's involved in killing somebody should be put to death. And you say, well, what about, if that's the case, then where do you stand on those who would kill somebody, but it's not intentional, it's not premeditated, it hasn't been thought through? Maybe there's an accident, for example, two people could be working in the woods and a terrible accident happens and somebody dies. Is that person supposed to be put to death for that? No, the Bible talks about that actually. The Bible makes provision for that. If you actually look in verse 13 of Exodus 21 even, it says, if a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint thee a place whether he shall flee. In other words, there was somebody that was killed, but it was not deliberate, it was not intentional. What should they do? Well, the Bible later is going to talk about cities of refuge, that those people that such things happen to them, that they could go to, and that they would be free from the avenger. They would be free from the one who wanted to see them killed through capital punishment. They would be free from that at least until the people heard the whole situation and it was judged, and it was there then decreed that indeed it was not deliberate, it was not premeditated, it was an accident. And in such a case, the person that was involved in killing the other person should not be killed. But it says in verse 14, but if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, thou shalt take him for mine altar from mine altar that he may die. In other words, if somebody kills someone else because they hate them or they're bitter toward them, they're angry toward them, whatever feeling it is, whatever act of emotion has caused them to do so, but it leads them to the place that they go and kill the person, then he says very clearly that person shall be put to death. And then we see the death penalty also for other offenses. For example, the smiting of a father or mother. It says, he that smiteth his father or mother shall be surely put to death, in Exodus 21 and verse 15. If you remember back in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 12, there was a command about honoring our fathers and our mothers, and there was actually a reward there for those that honored their parents. It said, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. As we looked at that time, we went forward to Ephesians chapter 6. In Ephesians chapter 6, we saw there in verses 2 and 3, where it says, honor thy father and thy mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the earth. So we see that there is a promise for those who honor their father and their mother. And when we stop and we see that, not only does God promise to bless obedience, but he has promised to discipline disobedience as well. And that's what we find as we come into Exodus chapter 21 and in verse 15, where it says, he that smiteth his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. And he's reminding us of the importance, as we've already looked at, of respect for parents A, because they're parents, and B, it is in the home that respect is learned. And if it's not learned there, people will not have respect for anyone in authority. So that is very key in that society and in the society that we live in. We're in a mess today because overall, man has lost respect for mankind. He's lost respect for life. And it's sad, and it's put us in the situation that we are in today. Have a great day.